Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. With the draft almost finally here, I want to bring on two of my beat reporting colleagues who cover the Commanders to have one last full discussion about the draft, the direction of the franchise, etc. So I have on Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. You can read her work on, of course, the WashingtonPost.com. And Ben Standig from The Athletic. Read his work with The Athletic, but also his podcast, Standig Room Only. I'll get to them in a minute. We're going to go over all sorts of topics. You know, some of the stuff we've covered a lot, but I want to bring you different opinions, even if it's similar topics. We do talk about Chase Young's fifth-year option. We talk a lot about a lot of things, mostly about the draft, where they could go, where they should go, etc. Before I get to them, just one more minute on a couple things, just a few things, some housekeeping items, I guess. I have a story up now on Sam Howell and what it's about. I wanted, because Washington is not aggressively pursuing a quarterback in this draft. Now, they still could take one. Hendon Hooker is a guy to watch. They had him in. We know when you bring him in like that, there is certainly an element that there's something they like about him. So that's a guy to watch, but they're not aggressively pursuing one like they have the last couple of years. Well, I asked some NFL draft analysts what they thought of Howell coming out and how they feel Howell compares to this class, and kind of I guess the question is, should they go after some of these quarterbacks, or how does Howell compare to them? Because if he compares favorably, why would you go after a guy? And what did they think of him coming out? Most of them were pretty high on him. Really, only one was not. And I also talked to an NFL assistant coach about him. He thought Howell was the best quarterback of the group last year. Didn't like the class overall, but for him, he liked Howell the best. Felt like he had to clean up his footwork. There's some fundamental issues. That's part of the reason why he fell to the fifth. It wasn't just because all those guys left, but that stuff was highlighted when people didn't see the production after those players left. That's some of the stuff teams harped on. But the guy liked Howell the best and felt like he went too low last year. I asked Mark Dominic, a former NFL general manager, what he thought as well. So it's all in the story on ESPN.com. And, you know, like I said, it was pretty mixed about what they felt about him. But you know what? That's what you should expect with a guy who was not a first round pick, clearly, but also is a guy who has limited action. I know the Commanders have liked what they've seen behind the scenes, and that's very important. That's what other people aren't going to see, and that's the stuff that will translate to on-field success if they feel like he progresses as much as they hope and as much as he did last year. That's something people will see next year if it's legit. So just take a deep breath, read the stuff, and know that it will unfold in the fall. Don't overreact, in other words. Also, ESPN will have our NFL Nation mock draft on Tuesday. It's from 7 to 9 on ESPN2. I've already made my pick. You can watch it on Tuesday night. I will say there are a number of ways that the Commanders could go based on the way the board fell when I made the pick. I'll explain my pick in my next podcast and also give you some other draft nuggets, some other things that I've heard and some guys to watch maybe after the first round. Do I feel confident in the pick? I never feel all that confident. I feel like it's somebody they would go after. Is it definitely going to be the guy they would take if it falls that way? I don't know, because they're not going to tell you everything. I do know a few things. I don't know everything, and I'll always admit that. So I think like I said, the way the board fell, they could trade back. There are a few other guys they could pick because there are multiple spots that would be could be addressed at 16. But I'll explain my pick on Tuesday night, and we'll go from there. So that's all I got. Got nothing else, folks. So let's get to my conversation with the Washington Post, Nicki Jhabvala, and the Athletics, Ben Standig.
The adventure park is ziplining through the trees. It's climbing from platform to platform. It's even an axe throwing competition with your friends. But what the adventure park really is opportunity. Reconnecting with friends and family, accomplishing a challenge, and making lasting memories. So book your visit today and choose your own adventure.
So, Ben, I did not tell Nicki that you were coming on at first because I know the bad blood that exists, and she throws down the gauntlet if she knows you're coming on. So, but I appreciate you guys coming on. So thank you very much. And I want to start off by, we're going to get into one, all of Ben's, what did you have, like 16 mocks? Is that how many did you do? How many did you do, Ben?
I had an article up with 6 the other day.
Yes. Now you realize.
Wait, in one article?
Yes. And it was all different tiers. It was all like, okay, if this happens, but you also set up a situation where you can say, I was right.
Of
Like
course.
guys, you can say you were right.
This is chess, not checkers. Come on.
Well, if you remember Jimmy the Greek back in the day, he would pick like different games at different times, or different teams at different times of the day, so he could say he got the winner right. So there you go. Anyway, so let's talk about the draft, because we're taping this on Friday, but it's going to be a few days when this airs. Do you feel like these guys are in a good position going into the draft, Nicki? Going in the draft, that this is what Ron and Martin kind of said at the press conference. I feel like, do you agree that they're in a good spot going into the draft to kind of address multiple areas and go where they need to go, not where they want to go, not where they have to go?
I do. I mean, it's good for them. It's terrible for us because it makes it pretty hard to predict which way. But yeah, I think they have pretty much any option open to them. Like, they're not going to take a specialist, probably not a defensive tackle, but I don't think any other position would necessarily surprise me at this point. And I could totally see the scenario where they decide to trade back again like they did last year and collect more picks. So yeah, I do think they have that freedom. I still, there are positions I would like to see them pick to kind of bolster their roster, but if they really feel confident about Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, then that gives them freedom. And they did bolster the line in free agency and brought in Cody Barton at linebacker. So they filled some holes. So, they don't have any urgent needs going into the draft.
I'll get to what you think they should do in a minute. Ben, are you done chewing your apple?
Mm-hmm.
I am done. We've digested. The Honey Crisp was very good, I have to say.
And by the way, because like Ben comes on, he said, "Oh, I didn't know he forgot it was gonna be on video, so he was eating an apple." I'm like, "Well, does it matter if it's on video or just being recorded? If you're chewing an apple, you're chewing an apple." Anyways, go ahead. I
just didn't want to chew like in front of you. I was gonna like wait, and I was like, "Oh wait, this is a thing." Anyway, yeah, I mean, they clearly think that they're good, like that they have flexibility. I guess they're right. Like, other than like the 5th defensive back, I could probably name who I think every starter would be at this point. But I think the offensive line still needs work. It's hard for me to point to any other than like Charles Leno is a solid option, and I'll just assume that Sam Cosmi will give them some lift at guard. But the rest of it to me is pretty wide open. I mean, they added Andrew Wiley, but he can shift inside. So I think they've got to get a stud offensive lineman somehow, or at least more upside help there, because we can blame Carson Wentz all we want last year, and clearly people will for what happened there, but in terms of the pass rush, but it wasn't just him. And they went over a decade with Trent Williams and or Brandon Scherf, and now they don't have anything close to that. So to me, they've got to get one. That doesn't mean it has to be at 16. It could be the second round, but they've done enough to give themselves a starting lineup, but I don't think they've done enough to say that they're legit good there.
Nicki, okay, since we started to go that way, do you agree with that? Is that where you go?
No, I
would
do
go
think
to.
they need to. Yeah, I think they need to bolster the line. I mean, I wouldn't mind if they took one of those cornerbacks high, but I think they could get a quality starter in the second, third round too. But I think they need help all over the line. I mean, yes, Charles Leno is a solid starter, but he's 32, and next year is no guaranteed money.
Plus, he's now in the podcast game. We can't have anybody else in here.
Yeah, that's competition. Yeah, sorry, man. So I mean, I think they need help across the line. So whether they take an interior guy or a tackle, I would love to see them take a tackle. It's a premium position. Get that, get a guy on a rookie contract and really start to rebuild the line through the draft. I mean, especially if you got a young quarterback, you gotta protect the kid.
I agree. And I think that's where you have to go, or not have to go. I think that's the ideal spot to go, because there are a couple of guys that I think they will like after the first round, but I'm looking hard at that if I'm them, because this is a guy that, they want to build up the trenches, right, Ben? He's talked a lot about defensive line, and since they got here, offensive line, and I don't think that line is built up yet. And you have some young guys that they're intrigued by, with like a Chris Paul from last year, and they'll always bring up Sadiq Charles, but he gets hurt. So right. Yeah, you need you need to get someone else. Does it matter to you what spot it is? Or do you see, like, for yourself, Ben, like when you're looking at this, is tackle the area to go at 16, or would you go interior there?
Well, this is where the board comes into play. And based on the projections that are out there, they're either going to be in a good spot to get a tackle like a Darnell Wright from Tennessee, or they're going to be in a miserable spot and there won't be any offensive linemen really at any spot that's worthy of being at 16, at least based on, again, the public boards. Their board obviously could be very different. That's why the trade down is not just to say, oh, trade down, get more picks, but like, no, actually for what they're looking for, especially if it's interior offensive line, that I think that would be ideal. Because like left guard, I'll just assume Nick Gates is going to be the center and Cosme at right guard. The left guard spot, I mean, I think we all agree, right, that Ron Rivera forgot, quote unquote, Andrew Norwell's name at the owners' meeting as a sign of like, we may not, may not send out his laundry here. If Curtis Samuel had wanted to buy what's his number?
Or
No. What's Norwell's number? Well, whatever. He could have. He wouldn't have had to buy Norwell's number. Let's just say I'm not feeling confident he's going to be around. So that left guard to me would be where I think they could go. But yeah, if Wright or one of those top linemen isn't there, then could they take Osiris Torrance at 16? Sure, but it feels like that would be a reach based on the public board. So if it's not Darnell Wright or one of those other tackles, then I kind of feel like I have to wait till day 2. But as you I think alluded to, they like some guys on day 2, so I don't think that's the worst case scenario if it comes to that. But that's a potential dilemma they're facing if they want to get one in round 1.
What do you think, Nicki, about, like, I know I get asked a lot about tight ends, and I probably bring it up all the time, and people might get tired of hearing about it, but you get asked a lot because, we saw what Kelsey did in the offense, but it's also Travis Kelsey. We know they have young tight ends they like, but they're also unproven. So What do you do with that spot?
Yeah, I mean, I thought at first at the start of the offseason, I should say, I thought, that maybe they move on from Logan Thomas. He's dealt with injuries. He's the older one of the group. Maybe they cut ties and turn to the draft since it's a pretty deep class and, really start to develop their younger guys. When that seemed to be like a non-factor, I thought they could take one in the first round. I just think do you want to spend that first round money on a tight end, which to me seems like a lot of money to spend at that position, especially if the class is relatively deep and maybe you could get a guy in the second round. I do know they really like Cole Turner. They felt like he didn't, get a chance to really show much. Ben, you had that really incredible stat about his, minimal snaps at the
he had one less touch than Reggie Bonifin.
Yeah. Wild.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
But he was the offseason star. I mean,
he was the offseason star, and then he had the calf injury, and that kind of derailed him for the entire season. So they like what they have in him. They like what they have in Armani Rogers. Curtis Hodges is still unknown. And they're hoping Logan Thomas can get back to the level he was in 2020. So I think they like their group, which makes me think they're, if they pick one, it's probably a day 2 or 3 guy to add to it. So,
what do you think, Ben?
So whenever I'm doing like these 7-round mock drafts for them, I always try to look at it. I mean, if I'm just doing 1, not 6, but if I'm just doing the 1, I'm always like, okay, is there actual space for this guy on the roster? Like, it can't just be, I think this player's good, and then there's nowhere to actually put him. I kind of think tight end might be the one spot there's no room in the end because they keep talking up about it, and I get it, right? I mean, Turner was really good in OTAs. I'm a little concerned that he got hurt, and then he basically wasn't heard from again for the most part. But Armani Rogers he looked pretty interesting, and they do seem to like Curtis Hodges, so... And if they were going to add somebody else, it almost feels like it might be a veteran, like somebody, in the late, this year's Ricky Seals-Jones type guy. So, yeah, I kind of feel like even though this is a really good class, even though I'm not convinced they have a future stud tight end, I would guess they may not take one, assuming that Rivera has not been lying to us for 3 months, which, I understand maybe, but feels like they're not lying.
Well, and I think, because to me, it comes down to, I agree with your point. I think that's how teams do look at it. Like when you're picking a guy, especially late, the question you have to ask yourself is, can this guy have a legitimate shot to make the roster? So you do kind of operate that way. And with tight ends, there are some guys that to me would be intriguing in that second, third round area that if you say, okay, this guy's sitting there like the Oregon State kid, Musgrave or someone like that, then it becomes intriguing because it kind of fits the profile of what they like, but you don't have to. And that's where, maybe you go after a quarterback in that area instead.
I'd like Musgrave personally because I wrote about him at the Senior Bowl, so I just want to do that retweet. Oh, here, read this thing. So I'm rooting for that.
Nice. Did you just say that, assuming you have one mock draft, does that mean the other 5 are not real ones? So you don't get credit for those if they're right.
Yeah. Which ones are
this was just an exercise. There will be a final 7-round mock, next week or whenever, or before the draft, I should say. So, don't
in the
worry.
Athletic.
Yeah. So I'll be on the record for that. And, plus I'm going to do a first round mock draft because,
so that's basically 8 first round mocks that you will have done, correct?
Oh, it's probably more than that. Well, that's only counting public. I mean, I tinker with it all the time. It's my, when I need to get away from the stress of life or find a happy place, my cat's busy.
A happy place is a mock draft.
Yeah, that's my hell.
I like it because it's like the one thing in my life I can control. I get to choose who goes where. I don't have the overlords telling me how life is going to be.
See, and we just did our mock draft for ESPN today, and I'll be honest, like it kind of drives me up a wall because you don't want to be wrong, you don't want to look bad.
Yeah.
And you don't know how it's going to go. And they only give us 5 minutes between picks. And we have our TV show Tuesday night. So, the world can find out who I picked at 16. But it's like, but I will be honest, it kind of drives me nuts because there's just so much. And with the sales stuff, and maybe that's a good way to get away from it, but the sales stuff for me is like, I feel like I haven't been able to spend as much time on the draft as I would like to have done or compared to the past. But that's just my little 2 cents.
I'm not telling you guys who I'm picking. It's a secret mock. I gave it to Ryan. Don't worry about it.
Well, I told you not to pick Dorian Robinson in the first round, so
Yeah.
quarterback. So, but you insisted, and so you
It's
can
an
look
all
silly.
California draft.
Yeah.
They all have California or Carolina ties.
I was going to say who's the highest Carolina guy here.
Yeah, seriously.
But I'm with you, Keim, in terms of the homework. I minimal relative to the norm because it's just been. It's not even so much like there's not definitive time of the day. I just burnt out. Don't want to like talk to anybody else. So yeah.
I was telling one of my colleagues, I'm like, you get to the point where it's like, oh, you have a few extra minutes. Like, should you make a call on, some crazy bidder, or do you make a call on the draft? And some of those days I opted for the draft because it was a crazy bidder, but other times it's a legit thing that you have to check out. And it's like, you only have so much time in the day to do all that. So that's, just not whining, but it is what it is, as the kids say. So, but I don't know. I think, go ahead.
The one thing I've thought about more this year than in past drafts, and it happens with every draft, is how will this impact some of the veterans on the roster? And I feel like there's a chance for there to be more, like I Chase Roulier for one, they've already brought in some interior linemen. He's still out there. He's been out there for the start of, the offseason workouts. What's their plan there? Norwell, I mean, whatever. But like Logan Thomas, might they revisit that if they do bring up a tight end in the draft? There's Kendall Fuller. Obviously, they need a strong corner. I think he's fine. Sorry, Joey's going crazy over tennis balls. But I mean, I do start to think about sort of the implications on the rest of the roster based on this draft.
No, I think you're right. Go ahead, Ben.
No, well, they have no salary cap space. If you look at the over the cap, factoring in the signing of the draft picks, they're underwater right now. So they're going to have to do something, whether that's release a player or restructure a contract or something. And you're right. I mean, Chase Roulier.
It's going to be hard to get Lamar Jackson the way it's set up right now.
I mean, I was kind of surprised they didn't do something with Curtis Samuel's contract, to be honest with you. But
there are some that you can do. And Chase, if he comes back, Chase Roulier, there's going to be a pay cut if he somehow does come back. And if I don't know where he necessarily fits. It's kind of a weird thing because you did sign Gates and his best spot is center. You have Tyler Larson. So do you take one of those two guys and how do you do it? But there's no way he's coming back at the cap number that he's currently at. And then you have Logan, you could restructure later if you want to, but there are some things they have to do. So, but
Yeah, and
go ahead.
and like I said, and Kendall Fuller. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like that would be a guy you'd want to keep,
Yeah.
even if you draft a cornerback. So good opportunity to extend him out and do that. But this is where maybe it comes back to the ownership stuff. Like how much? I mean, when Rivera told us at the owners meeting that they were going to effectively wait on Chase Young until there was an ownership situation in place, they haven't done anything right since. So I mean, it could be just waiting on everything, including extending guys that might seem like they should.
Well, I think there's that. And it's also the other part of that is how many of these veterans would you really want? You're not going to get rid of a lot of them because you kind of need to win this year too. So there's only so, you may want to keep the Logan. You're certainly going to keep Kendall around, Fuller. You may want to keep Logan around because if you have all these young tight ends, do you really want to move on from a guy that could help you right now? Is that a factor, Nicki?
No, I agree. I'm trying to my dog's always.
Your dogs are. I haven't heard them. I don't know. I thought it was Ben. I thought it was Ben eating
again.
again.
Ball got under the table, so now
that was my stomach. I haven't had lunch
yet. But no, I agree with you completely. I do, and I think Logan especially is one of those guys that they really view as one of the leaders of the team. Just in the way he helps the younger guys in the room. And that's, no disrespect to the other veterans, but I think him especially, they want him there. So yeah, I still think the ripple effect of this year's draft will be interesting. Can I go get that tennis ball real quick?
Go ahead. So I'll ask Ben this then. When you look at, you brought up Chase Young, where do you think what's the impact there? And again, my take on this is if you haven't said if you're going to pick it up, it's not a good sign that you're probably going to. What do you think? I know you've written about this too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like what's the point of not announcing you're picking him up? Like, you and I were talking about this yesterday or on Thursday when we were out there that there can't be anything left for Chase Young to prove. I'm sorry, not prove, to show them in terms of making a decision within a few days. Right. So that can't be much of a thing. So yeah, it feels like they're going to not pick it up, or at a minimum, see what they find in the draft. Not saying this was like an Einstein kind of a split in the atom kind of moment, but like there was like a day a few weeks ago, and I was like, wait a minute, every single defensive end that they have right now is well, that's funny. Their top 5 defensive ends are all free agents after this year, and now their 6th one is
there's a little bit of trouble.
Yeah,
a little bit. So there's kind of a long-term aspect of this. Like, well, maybe you need to get somebody, and plus like a first-round pick, like it would at a minimum be a better third option for this year as a pass rusher, most likely than what they had. It's obviously an extreme to do it, but if they do decide they're not picking up Chase's option, I don't see how Chase and or Montez are back next year. You need then another starter, and a cheap one on the defensive line isn't bad when you're paying the other 2 guys a ton of money and maybe a third if you extend Sweater Young. So I don't know if Lucas Van Ness from Iowa sitting there. I just want him to be there. I don't know if they have to pick him. I just want to see what happens. That's all I'll say.
I think that would be an interesting one. And I also think that, there's Miles Murphy's in there too. And we know he was in here. And I think there's a lot to like about that guy as well. But would you do it at 16 or would you trade back? But Nicki, you have to put those guys on the list, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think you've mentioned this before, that I think you absolutely have to add another pass rusher to that group. But especially given the uncertainty with Montez and Chase, I could still see a scenario where Montez is back, even if they choose to move on from Chase. I mean, I know the coaching staff really likes Montez, but can they make it work? I feel like they can make it. You can typically make a lot of things work. It's just that, do you want to allocate that much money to one positional group? And they've already allocated a ton to the line. But it would be interesting if they continue this, all first round pick defensive line. And,
is it a risk? Is it a risk not to pick up the option, or is it a bigger risk to pick it up?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess in some ways you could see it both ways, it's to not pick it up. If you do end up keeping him, that means you're gonna pay a lot more in that 5th year on a new deal, instead of having him on that 5th year contract or a 5th year option. The risk in picking it up is that's fully guaranteed once you do it. And you are locked in, and that's going to be a significant salary cap hit in 2024. So it's going to limit you for another season. So you better be sure that he's the 2020 Chase Young and not.
And it's funny because I'm sure you guys get asked this question too once in a while. I was like, well, if you're not going to pick it up, why not trade him? My take, and see if you guys agree, would be you could trade him, and it's going to be for a lower pick because you're coming off the injuries, lack of production because of the injuries and whatever other, the second year wasn't as great. So maybe you get like a lower round pick. To me, that like, I don't want the 4th, 5th round pick. I'd rather have a motive, see how, if this motive, if it pushes Chase Young and he has this great breakout year, I'll roll the dice that he has that versus trying to get a pick now and just going on, because I don't think it's necessarily that they want to move on. I think they want to see. I think they, if he goes out and has a big year, you can't let him walk.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So what do you think, Ben?
Well, I mean, to your other question, I mean, look, there's obviously an argument both ways, especially if you think that Chase Young is going to return to form. I do think, though, the riskier call is picking it up, because I'm just going to stay on this. This is my 2024 campaign stump speech. I just don't see a world that they can extend all 4 of these guys simultaneously. And if Chase Young is picked up at $17.5 million guaranteed for 2024, and at the moment, Allen and Payne, their deals are going to be in the account for $20 million or more that year. What are you doing with Montez Sweat? Yeah, I know they have the franchise tag, but then you have no cap flexibility with that. And, and you already don't really on Chase's either unless they extend him and yada, yada, yada. So to me, if you pick up Chase, the odds of Montez Sweat leaving, I think, increase. And I would like to keep my options open, especially since he is the one I would rather keep right now. So plus, in the worst case scenario, they both ball out. You tag one and extend the other. It'll cost you more money than if it would be now, but now you have more proof. So I would not pick it up for those reasons.
And I throw this out there, not saying they should move on from their best defensive lineman currently, but Jonathan Allen doesn't have any guaranteed money left on his deal in 2024. Right. So they'd eat some dead money if they moved on from him. He'd be like, what, 29, right? But I think they'd save like probably close to $9.5 million. That was the downside of the contract he signed. It was incredibly team friendly. It was basically a 2-year locked in.
And that's a good point. And I think it'd be hard, but that's why if you got a Van Ness or Miles Murphy, then you can keep, and it's the same thing with the rookie quarterback, to have those rookie quarterback or young quarterback, rookie quarterback contracts. I think at some of those other premium positions, you can almost say the same thing. And I think end is one of those positions where you're paying a high premium for those types of guys. And I think the one thing that you can't discount with Montez Sweat, we can look at the numbers and sack totals, but Montez Sweat is really, really good against the run and really plays within the context of their defense in terms of funneling and all that and how he sets the edge. And you can't discount that either. So let me ask you too, like this particular group, it's the 4th draft for the, it's really the 3rd draft for this group, the front office and all that. How do you feel they've done the last couple of years, Ben?
I mean, there's obviously some good finds along the way. Your Cam Curls, their 2 running backs were both 3rd round picks. Jahan Dotson, I mean, look, give them a lot of credit. It seemed like they might have been reaching a little bit to take them at 16. It doesn't feel that way now. But look, I'm not going to, I don't get into the whole they should have taken Justin Herbert bit over Chase, but at the same point, it hasn't to this minute worked out the way they would like. I mean, it wasn't just the injury. He was not doing well prior to that. And then, Jamin Davis, there seemed to be some steps last year. Maybe I don't know if there were baby steps or, full grown. He's looking like an adult out there too much, but they need some more out of that. And then also, this is more of a strategy thing than a pick, but taking Fedarian Mathis last year, obviously they did that because they figured that Deron Payne was going to go or they were going to let him go. Now you have a 2nd round pick who, what's he going to play? 50% of the snaps sometimes, maybe, and so I think they've done okay, but some of the top ones, I think maybe they're not going to get. They haven't gotten full value yet, at least.
What do you think, Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still of the mind that it's too early to tell on, at least last year's draft or the 2021 draft class. I think Jamin, I would definitely say that you probably shouldn't have taken him in the first round. I do still think he can be a quality player, but not maybe that first round level. The expectations are just so high when you go there. But I do, as Ben said, I do think they've found some quality picks, especially on day 2. I mean, Benjamin St. Juste, I think, can be a really good player. Derek Forrest is a really solid find. I think, he's just starting to come into his own. And Cam Curl, that was, it was a good find. I don't want to take away any credit from them, but had he gone on visits and had it not been, the COVID year, I don't think he would be sitting there at 7.
No.
So, I still think it's a little too early to tell. I would have liked to, and I don't, I say this, but I don't know who they should have gone with instead, really. So I'm going to sound like a moron saying this, but they're in 2021 when they really tried to bolster their line with William Bradley King, Shaka Tony, who's now out for the season, maybe longer. I thought they might get more production out of those rotational guys, but
I think that was something they're hoping for. I think that's why we're going to see more. This is a good draft. You can get some edge guys later, and I think you'll definitely see that. The couple guys to me that can really make or break these classes would be obviously Sam Howell. What does he do? Because if he elevates this year, if he becomes a player they hope, then that certainly makes last year's class and that trade, to pick up, look really good. Percy Butler, Cole Turner, what do they do? Because I think, you start to hear good things about Percy Butler, but where we're going, as we talked about with Cole Turner, looked great in OTAs or the minicamp and then early in training camp, and then never saw it during the season, whether it's injury or whatever. So how does he look this year? And so that could really make that class look a lot different in hindsight. And, I always like the idea of trading back and getting more picks, especially in this draft. And then, all right, Hendon Hooker, do you take him? If so, where?
What can I just say? We're missing the thing. This regime, they traded up for a long snapper. I don't know if you give them points for that or mock them for that, but that did happen.
He's a really good long snapper.
But his name is Cheeseman. So, I mean, that's,
Oh, it's great. He looks good and it's a good name, and Tress Way likes him. So that's all that matters. Hendon Hooker, I mean, to me, doesn't make any sense for them. I'm curious if he even gets picked in the first round. I could see maybe a team at trading back into the end of the first round to get the 5th-year option, but that just seems like a lot to take a guy who, at his advanced age for an NFL player, for a rookie, and coming off the ACL. That just seems like a lot. But obviously, people are desperate for that position, so nothing would surprise me.
Yeah.
Would you take him, Nikki, if you're these guys? Let's say you pick up an extra 2nd-round pick, or he's sitting there when you pick in the 3rd round. I would consider him
as a day 2 pick for sure. I mean, listen, you don't know what Sam Howell is yet. He looked pretty good in that lone start, but you don't know. And if you don't view Jacoby Brissett as a long-term starter, which he's, I thought he played really well last year in Cleveland, but do you view him as a long-term guy? Probably not. That's not why you brought him in here on a 1-year deal. So, until you have that guy keep swinging, and Hendon Hooker is probably going to need a year to fully recover, probably developed, since he's, was in that offense in Tennessee that is super spread out. So yeah, I absolutely, I would take I would use a day 2 pick on him.
I'm swinging at it until I get it right.
Exactly. That's
and
how
Howell might be the guy. And if let's say you took Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round and Howell has a really good year, you're set. And if he doesn't, and maybe you have another option there with the guy that some would have put in the 1st round had he stayed healthy. And even though he's an old man, what would he be next year? 26, Ben?
26.
Yes.
Well, yeah. So
it's interesting. I mean, he's the same same high school class as Jake Fromm. I think Jake Fromm was the number 2 pro style quarterback in that class. And
Yeah.
Jake's what? Is this his 4th year, I think?
I don't know. It's a lot of practice squads.
Well, then there's also Stetson Bennett, right? Isn't he older than Jake Fromm?
Yeah.
So,
That
and
extra year, that COVID year.
yeah, and, so, but I would take him if you get in one of those situations where almost like it's an extra pick or a 3rd round pick, because because he's not going to help you that first year.
Yeah.
That's why you can't, it's hard to waste. It's hard if you only have 1 second round pick and you take it on a quarterback that's not going to play. I think that's awfully difficult.
I think wasted 1st round picks, haunt you for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing. How much do you guys get asked about the rebrand? And do you like if new owner comes in and this is like,
that should be like item number 20 on their list of priorities. Like win, get fans back, get a new stadium, like the rebrand. Okay. But does it even make sense to have a 3rd name in 4 years? I mean, it just kind of, is it as marketable? It's whatever. I don't think anybody's going to be the fans are never going to be pleased with, one name. There will always be detractors. They're not going back to the old name. That much is for sure. And
right.
It's a lot of money to rebrand. It's not just change the name. It's a lot of money. It's, taking down signs, changing jerseys, like it's a lot of money. So is that going to be their first expenditure? I hope not.
To me, if that's the first thing you do, I think you're looking at the wrong thing. And I don't know that people want it to be the first thing, but is it a thing, Ben, that you think they should do? And like we all did stories about this a couple of years ago, and the intense workload that it requires.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know that you just put a group in there and just say go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's as is always the case. The Green Bay Packers, that's a terrible name, except history has now made it.
Yeah.
People hated the Ravens too.
It's a meat packing company.
Right.
Just imagine if somebody came in and said like, hey, we're getting a team in Green Bay. Let's name them after the meat packing company.
Yeah.
Right. So, look, if they go out and have
nobody hates the Knickerbockers. I mean, come on.
Right. Also, like, to me, whatever the group comes in, they don't have to do anything that crazy because they are already the crazy thing that will have happened. That they exist and Dan Snyder doesn't. Everything else, do take your time, figure out what makes sense. And this would be one where I don't think you have to do this at all, let alone early. I just see what happens and kind of go from there.
There are a lot of fans that will be vocal about it. Should they be listened to?
No, I mean, you start winning, I think that changes everything. Suddenly everything is great, when you win.
Plus, I'm only listening to people who have the blue check marks now because they have the edit button. Other than that, I don't care.
No, I told Keim I caved to peer pressure. I canceled it. So I have like a week left.
Okay. I was wondering because you said
I caved.
I wanted to have you guys on because I wanted to talk to people who are now verified, unlike myself.
Yeah, I felt like people were judging me, like for being whatever.
Wow.
I'm a bad typer. But then JP put out that tweet, like, I don't want to repeat about,
Well, I responded to it.
What tweet did he put
out?
out?
Like, I literally, I don't need the check mark. Take the check mark.
What did JP say? I missed this.
He said that if you're doing Twitter blue and you're claiming it's for the edit button, it's like people saying they read Playboy for the articles.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
It's not true.
Ben, I'll tell you what, Ben, give me $10 when we're sitting next to each other in the press room, and I'll check over your tweets before you send them out. How's that?
Deal.
I have no problem if somebody wants to pay for it. I don't care. It's just
I don't understand how does anybody think it's cloud chasing? No, we all know it's now a joke. So
I don't care. I don't care about checks. Well, I just want the edit function.
There's one check that I want. I just want my checks are direct deposit, baby. That's what I want.
Wow. How long you been sitting on that one?
I just came up with that, believe it or not. So, but yeah, anyway, I don't just know that we're still like, my thing looks the same and it's not, whatever the followers are, you can check and see. If you don't believe me, then whatever. So
nice.
I don't know.
It will be interesting, to be honest, like going down the line, like for us too. I mean, we're the first line of having to figure out what's going on there, what news
Yeah.
is real. And now when there's, we constantly get, oh, so-and-so is reporting this. Well, who is it? What's the person? Is it, who knows? Sometimes they're right, but often they're wrong. And
Right. You have to be.
Somebody changes one letter in Schefter's name, and I think Schefter kept the check though.
He did.
He was not afraid of peer pressure, unlike some people.
But yeah, I didn't. My thing was, I don't know what is it exactly with the edit button. I'll be honest that
you've never used the edit button.
I haven't, and it's probably been evident a couple times. It has been, but I didn't realize that actually was an option for us. So, it's not.
Well, you had to buy Twitter Blue. Did you buy Twitter Blue, the $8 a month? Oh, well then never mind. What do you?
So I didn't have it anyway.
You had to buy it.
Correct.
No, I never.
Yeah.
I bought it before Elon took over, when they had it originally, when it was like $3 or whatever it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When was that?
A couple months before it got sold.
Right before it was sold.
All right, so
they were experimenting, I think, so.
I'm way behind. I'm just,
That's shocking.
I spend too much time on Facebook, so I'm a little bit behind the times.
Are you still on MySpace?
I mean, who isn't?
Well, the hope is that when the Commanders make their first pick, they don't feel like they need an edit button. So there you go.
There you go. On that note, we'll end on that one. Thanks a lot for coming on. Tell the folks where they can find you, Ben, podcast, Athletic. Tell them.
On Twitter at Ben Standig. The Athletic, Standig Room Only podcast. Come by, say hi.
There you go. Nicki.
At Nicki Jhabvala at the Washington Post. I do not have a mock draft. And on Instagram, if you want to see photos of my dogs.
There you go. That's it. And if you want to see Ben eating an apple, go to the very start of this. Actually, no, we didn't. We didn't get that.
You got it out. Oh no.
Yeah. I'll just tweet a video out of it. It'd be fine.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See ya.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Nicki and Ben for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with another podcast Tuesday night. The video come out Wednesday morning. And we'll be talking about the draft, why I made the pick I did in the ESPN NFL Nation mock draft, the reasoning behind it, and just some other things that I've picked up throughout this draft process. I'll talk to you next time.